with all of that said, though, Holly, I mean, why shouldn't you be further ahead then, according to the polls?
Well, as I just said, I think that Australians are so under the pump that they're not honed in on politics full time. They don't live in our little bubble. They don't get up and read 3 or 4 newspapers every morning. They don't spend the Monday morning of a 4-day-long weekend in here with you. I mean, I can think of nowhere else that I would want to be. But there'll be a lot of people still having a sleep in on a public holiday because, this isn't the bubble they live in. I think the greatest fear that this country faces, and I hope whether you're a Liberal voter or a Labor voter, the thought of a hung parliament, the thought of having to deal with some of those crossbenchers still remaining there and being able to drive decisions in this country is actually a much scarier outcome for everybody. So I hope to see Peter Dutton and the Prime Minister afterwards, and I'm sure, Matt would like to see Anthony Albanese, but I think for the sake of Australians, the risk of a minority government is a very scary one. Hey,
Holly, like politicians, we don't get days off. We don't get public holidays, so good to have you with us, by the way.
I know. I had yesterday at Sky too. Where else would I want to be?
There we go. We just love it. Matt, one of the issues that has dogged your government of late has, of course, been migration and detainees. Now we're seeing reports about exemptions of your migration laws that would include tourists, business folks, students from blacklisted countries being allowed in. But if those exemptions are allowed, would that not mean that your policy is watertight or isn't watertight?
This has been an issue for some time, Pete. You've got people who come to Australia on visas, and we're not talking about refugees here. We're talking about people who may come on a tourist visa or some other visa, and then they overstay and they breach their visa conditions. And under the former government, they were milking the system. They couldn't be deported, and they'd end up costing taxpayers millions of dollars each year. And this government has said, well, enough's enough. We're going to fix that loophole in the system and make sure that the migration minister has the power and the discretion to force those people to comply with their visa conditions and leave the country. Now, we think that that is a reasonable step, that the government of Australia should have sovereignty over our borders and have the power to enforce that sovereignty. But unfortunately, the coalition sought to play politics with that last week and send it off to a Senate committee rather than putting it through the Senate. They voted for it in the House. They said they were going to support it.
Having accountability, what a crazy concept. The Senate doing its job. What a crazy concept. This is how outrageous this government is, that they wanted to ram through these changes within 36 hours. Massive changes to our immigration laws within 36 hours. No one can really say what the urgency is. Claire O'Neill did let slip that perhaps it's got something to do with an upcoming court case where, again, the government has failed in its own defence. It has made admissions, made absolute ridiculous claims that have never been made before the court before, that may lead to another 151 on top of the 147 that are already out, detainees, that this government doesn't know where they are. They've let out murderers and rapists onto our street and they do not know where they are, and they have the gall to suggest that it's playing politics. Matt, perhaps you can explain why your government wanted to ram this through within 36 hours but have not been able to explain why it's so critical, what's the time sensitivities here, why are they tinkering at the edges now, and why are you trying to circumvent the role that the Senate is there to play? That is what happens. It goes to a legislation committee. You guys have got the numbers in these anyway, but every piece of legislation goes to a Senate legislation committee, and you tried to circumvent that last week. Why?
Matt, do you want to see?
I can tell you what the urgency is.
Do you want to see an emergency session of Parliament recalled pre-budget, Matt?
Well, I'll tell you what the urgency is. The urgency is that for a decade, people were getting away with this. They were rorting the system and getting away with it under the previous government.
So
and the new government
that is absolutely ridiculous. We're now looking at people. You are absolutely making this up.
This is not working.
No one believes Labor's
just finish your point.
tough
We're almost out of time. Talking over each other doesn't work with our viewers at home. But Matt, just finish off your point. Holly, quick response and we'll have to go. Matt, just finish off your point there.
Yeah, the urgency is that it's costing taxpayers millions of dollars each year by delaying and not fixing this problem. And we believe that we need to fix this problem and stop this rot and ensure that we have integrity in our border system again and our immigration system.
All right, we'll leave it there. Matt, Holly, you got a closing thought?
Mate, no one believes Labor's tough on borders. That is just an absolute load of rubbish. And the best part is that Andrew Giles had the date still on the briefing papers and the draft ledge on the top of the document when he tried to brief the opposition within the 36 hours. He has been sitting on this, absolutely doing nothing about it. It is complete and utter fallacy, Matt. You are just being, either you're being lied to, the Australian people are.
We will have to leave it there. But thank you both for appearing on this public holiday Monday morning. Good to have you with us. We'll see you again next week.